Hey there everybody, it's Ather Beer Stand here. I'm here with a special mini-series, I guess you would call it, about Steve's Factory Manager. And we're going to be using Steve's Factory Manager throughout my existence here on this map of the server to automate some things that are normally rather difficult to automate. And this isn't difficult, but it is a little bit tricky. So I think it warrants some explanation and perhaps its own little series. So this is inventory cable, and these are the only two blocks. If we go in here, we've got Steve's Factory Manager. All of these different blocks build the system. But for this beginning episode and for this beginning project, we're just going to be using these beginning two blocks. The Machine Inventory Manager, which is pretty easy. Look, it's 9 and another 10 redstone for the block itself, and some iron, and then and miscellaneous tidbits that you can pick up off the ground most of the time. And then some gold and iron and such. That gets you 8. And we're gonna see that 8. I just made the one craft. 8 is gonna be sufficient, I think, for this build. And so that shows you what you can do. We got to put one here under the hatch, and then we're gonna put our inventory manager there. And what this inventory cable does is connect all these machines, kind of like a wire. All these machines get connected up to the inventory manager so that the manager itself can see their inventories. As you might expect, it's all actually very self-explanatory. And this is not going to be a mod or a tutorial, rather, in the sense that we're going to go through every single feature and have examples and do that kind of thing. But what we're going to look at is very practical applications in game, in an actual build, in a real world, with real resource requirements and considerations that are going to get progressively more difficult and complicated as we go. So this is our interface, and it doesn't look like much, but we're gonna build it. So the way that this machine works, it's the Machine Inventory Manager, which does exactly what the name implies. It manages the inventories of all the machines that are connected to it. So we got one under the farm hatch, and we got one under these engines, and that's what we currently have access to, right? It doesn't recognize these pipes as inventories. So this area here is for barrels. We may or may not need them, depending on how tricky we want to get, but I think for the beginning episode, we're going to want to maybe use some barrels as some temporary storage buffers. They're kind of big buffers, but that's okay. So first thing I want to do is build a couple more of these project tables that we've been using in our forestry mods playthrough, just so that they'll be around. No, that's not right. That's what we were using previously. It's a work table. Yeah. So we're going to need chests, and we're going to need a crafting table. We're going to need chests for our barrels too. So let's take and just build a bunch of chests real quick, so we can have them on hand throughout this project, because I foresee a need. And a crafting table. I think we can get by with just one of these guys for now. Great, and we'll take this downstairs with us. I think, no, we'll leave it up here. I'm going to want that probably right up there. So let's make some barrels real quick. For that, we need some of our chests, and we need... oh yeah, okay. That'll do, I think. Wow, okay, it doesn't function like a normal crafting table does exactly. I forget. It's been a long time since I've used these, actually. These work tables, since Minecraft was a thing. Let's get that. Will be sufficient for now. So we're going to put these barrels down in the ground to hold the various items, and we'll probably need a chest too. So let's do like this. And oh, we left all of our chests up there, did we? Okay, well, we'll worry about that in a minute. In fact, that chest over there was kind of intended for this purpose, so we'll just grab it. Oh, really? You and your buddy too, huh? Look at that. Didn't even take any damage. Didn't even dull my pick. He'll be good as new in a moment. It is rather inconvenient and inconsiderate, I might add. So that, I think, should comprise our entire system. Really? You more? Okay, let's end this problem. This is like... I can only sleep on a server, but there's 100 zombies running around. Okay, oops, wrong thing. Alright, back to business. Nope, we got one more coming. Yep. Okay, back to business. So now every process in this system begins with a trigger. So we're going to create a trigger, and then we need an input to begin with. This is the most basic. Our first process that we want to automate is extracting items from the farm. That's the simple thing, right? Pretty easy. I don't think there's currently anything in the farm to extract because it ran out of water, which is actually kind of an issue for the purposes of this tutorial. In fact, I might have to cut away and fix that here in a moment because, oh, never mind. Okay, so we're back. I took the time while we were away to hydrate the farm, and now we have some output here. So that will be useful for this demonstration. So like I said, our first goal is how do we take stuff out of the farm and put it in these barrels and this chest. So we've got the trigger, and we've got an input, and we need an output as well. Now, these are a little bit counterintuitive until you put it in the right context. When it says input, what that means is it's inputting from some kind of an inventory into the manager. Okay? It's not inputting into these things. So input means an input into the factory manager, and output means an output into something else. Like we're going to output to those engines, and we're going to output to these barrels, and we're going to output to this chest, and eventually we're going to output back into this farm hatch as we get into some more complicated stuff. So the trigger, we've discussed trigger. There are several options for triggers. You have on interval, which is a timer. You have it controlled by redstone or by a block update detector, which is one of Steve's factory manager blocks we'll get into possibly later. Or you can have a delayed trigger, which I actually don't know what that is. I'm guessing it's exactly what it says. It's a delayed trigger. And then of course you can set the time. So right now it'll just happen every second unless we tell it to do something different. The input, we want to look at inventories, and we want to find our farm hatch. See, it shows every inventory that's connected via those inventory cables. So our farm hatch is what we're looking for. The target is which side of it we want to interface with, and it's defaulting to down here, which is the correct side. That's the side that you can output from. Actually, I think if you have a forced extraction, something with a powered extraction that actually pulls items, you can go from any face, but it will passively output to the down face. You can put a chest or a pipe under there. So down is good. Items, we want an empty blacklist because we want it to take everything for the time being until we want to do something else with those things. And then our output is going to be these inventories, and we're going to select all of our barrels like so. I think maybe we have another one. No, that's all of them. So it's going to put it in those barrels. And item, again, empty blacklist. We want everything to go in barrels that can. Oh, so the last thing we need to do is connect these things. So you just click on that and it gives you this little line, and you can connect here. And then we can go here, get this one and connect it to that. And as you can see, it almost instantly populated these barrels with everything from the farm. But what happens if all the barrels are full and it comes out with something else? So let's have a second output. put secondary to this, so it will go to this one first. This is a way to set priority. It'll go to the barrels first, and if it can't deal with it with those barrels and it's just kind of left hanging, it's going to go to this secondary output, which if we choose an inventory, we're going to choose this chest, because that's our overflow. And again, we'll go with an empty blacklist until we come up with a reason to restrict these things. So now we have an overflow, and we can drag these around and kind of make some kind of a logical sense to, whatever pleases your sensibilities, really. That's just aesthetic. The game doesn't care how you order those things. So the next thing that we're concerned with is that this thing takes dirt and it produces sand. I don't think it happens whenever a tree grows anymore. That used to be the case, that whenever a tree grew, who's on the server? We can sleep. That would be useful if it were daytime, so we could watch some trees grow. Not there. No. Dang it. Stupid Zomberts. We go up here. Life on a server. This is the disadvantage of not doing things like tutorials in a creative mode. Okay, but daytime, see, we get some trees growing, and I don't know if it happens every time, but it creates sand, and we need to create dirt. And the way we do that is we need sand, rotten flesh, and saplings, which conveniently enough, we get saplings and sand out of the farm, so really we just need rotten flesh, and I'm not seeing sand appear. So either it's happening so fast that it's not showing it, or it just doesn't happen every time, in which case we only need as much dirt as we have an overflow of sand, right? So we're going to have to run back to the other base. Even though we have the mob spawner right here, everything that comes out of it is somewhere else. So let's quick and fly over here and grab a couple of, maybe, how much room do we have? 2 more stacks, that'll do. I think. Bearings this way. So we can use this recipe and saplings from the farm. Well, actually, for now, we'll use saplings out of this barrel. Later, we're going to explore pulling things selectively out of the farm so that these barrels become obsolete. Hopefully. That's the goal anyway. We'll see if we can achieve that. Oh. So we need to put rotten flesh. Yeah, and we should lock all these barrels. And eventually what I'll probably do is B-space this barrel in with the other barrel so that all of the rotten flesh is available to the farm at all times, which it totally won't need, but it'll be fun. So now, in order to have the system craft things, we need another trigger. And actually let's explore, let's not have this other trigger. Let's explore another aspect. There's a flow control. Let's make a flow control. And if we click on that, and we have options. It's a collector, meaning it has things that come into it and it has one output. Or it's a split, and what we want is a split. We want 2 outputs. Oops. Wrong thing. Go away. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click here, and then we're going to go back there, and then we can reposition these things just a little bit to make a little more logical sense. So then this input will come off the same trigger. We won't connect it now because it's a little bit easier not to for demonstration purposes. Probably just practically in all senses. So we need an input, and we need a crafter. and we need an output, the logical chain of events, right? So our input for inventories, we're going to select apple oak saplings, sand, and rotten flesh. What was in there? Apple oak pollen. See, so we have a new item populating our barrels. That one we'll probably not want in our barrels. We'll probably want that to overflow to the chest. So we'll adjust that later. So we've got our 3 barrels. Target doesn't really matter. Down is great. Now what we want to do is we want to whitelist for this, and we want to whitelist. You see, you can just type in what you want. Sand, yes. We want to whitelist apple oak sapling, and we want to whitelist rotten flesh. Now, the formula, the recipe, if you recall, was 1 sand, 1 rotten flesh, and 1 apple oak sapling. How do we make that work? So the first step is to limit the input. And this is my approach anyway. So sand, see, it says you can specify. That was a right click, by the way. You right click that to bring up this little sub menu. It says specify amount. So I want it to pull 1 sand. Precise detection is fine because it's sand. It doesn't need to be anything else. Damage value is of no concern. Apple oak saplings, we needed 3 of those. Oh, oops. Back. I clicked all wrong. That was a left click, so it brought up the menu to ask me what I wanted to put there. So right click again, specify an amount, and this time we want 3. Right? And because this is an unknown genome, it could have any kind of attributes and could potentially change at times because we have bees in the area that are going to potentially mutate this tree. So we want fuzzy detection, where now it doesn't, as long as the name of the item is apple oak sapling, it doesn't matter, no other information matters, only the fact that it is named apple oak sapling. So that will always work for us, and we're pulling 3 of those. Let's go back, and then rotten flesh, specify amount 1, great, go back. So that is our recipe. We're going to go into our crafter, and unfortunately this is a little bit tedious, but here we go. Sand, wrong finger, rotten flesh, apple, I can't see it. Apple oak, okay. And then it'll be there for the other 2. It's a pretty well constructed mod, I have to say. This was a Mod Jams entry. It got polished up a little afterwards, but really good mod, Visui, for whatever the deadline on that was. So, and I think the way we're setting this up, this is excess inventories, which is if you had an overflow of goods, they would get put into, some overflow. We'll put that as the chest just to see if we get any, because otherwise it's going to go into the barrels and we might not notice. So that's that's a good way to experiment and kind of check your work. And the priority is move before crafting, so that is move it into the factory manager before crafting. I don't know how you would do craft before moving. Maybe if you had items coming in from elsewhere, like maybe in this case the sand coming in from this extraction from the farm, I suppose, potentially. I'm not sure how that might work. I'd have to sit and kind of puzzle the logic out. So if we connect that, and then our output is going to be the farm hatch, and the target is the west side. See, and this is great because this is why automating a tree farm or a multi-farm in general is a difficult thing, because the dirt has to go into the west side of the hatch and you have to extract from the bottom of the hatch, and you have to put in things like saplings and such in through the top of the hatch. So normally we would be restricted by those things really in our placement to the northwest corner of the farm, or we would have to have multiple hatches throughout the farm, which is certainly doable, but not the focus of this mod. So this allows us to do it with just the single hatch. Our next thing is fertilizer. We need to have fertilizer. That's this. So the recipe for that, if it'll give it to us here, and we don't want those recipes because they kind of suck. We want this recipe, which is by far the best. I brought some apatite ore with me. Oh dang. I didn't. Hang on. Let's just farm this up real quick. A couple blocks anyway, so we can throw it in a barrel to have an inventory. Fortune. There we go. Don't need that for the time being. How many did that give us? Interesting. Better just to pulverize it, I think. That was not a very good return on investment, even with Fortune 3. You get 12 per, incidentally, if anyone's interested, from the pulverizer. So we got a little bit of ash in the chest already, but I think, and this is what makes this a great system. What am I trying to put in here? I'm trying to talk and do stuff at the same time. I don't remember. These engines produce ash. So that's where we're going to pull our supply of ash, and that'll be probably the choke point, the limiting factor. Well, actually the limiting factor will be that this takes almost none of this fertilizer to operate. So we need, we can now connect. Actually, before we do that, let's take our dirt out of here. We can leave the 4 in, that's fine. And this way we can see it in action, and it should be, if we connect this, if I've done everything correctly, that we start getting dirt in here. No? Are we missing an ingredient? No, we are not. Okay, then I have set something wrong, so let's go through and double check things. We've got apple oak saplings, sand, and rotten flesh. From the bottom of the barrel should be adequate. We didn't connect here. Yes, okay. There we go. We're getting our dirt. So that's one successful crafting operation. And now you can see how we might not even need these barrels, because all of the stuff that we're using, save the rotten flesh, is actually coming out of the farm in the first place. So we could just be extracting from there and inserting to it, just from different bases, potentially. We'll try to work through to that anyway, as we get a little more complicated. So the next thing we need to do is craft up this fertilizer, which is going to need another process just like this, but our flow control, wrong place to click on that, is a little bit crowded. Wrong place to click on that. These things are very particular. So let's drag these out to the, and my inclination is just to click in the wrong place apparently. Let's drag those out there. So if you recall, we can adjust this to 5 outputs, and then we should be good. Oops. Do this. So now we need another input. And you'll notice, even though we're dealing, especially in this case, we're dealing with multiple inputs, multiple inventories, you still only need one input if you set things up correctly. And we need another auto crafter, and we need another output. So more of the same, but with a slight variation thrown in, which is we're dealing not only with a barrel, which is going to be apatite, we're also dealing with each of these engines, which are completely different kinds of inventories. So if we recall, our recipe was 1 apatite surrounded by ash. So we need to import 8 ash. So our target is down, that should be fine. So we need to whitelist appetite, and it wouldn't necessarily be that we would have to whitelist appetite just to get this done, but in order to control the number of things, and ash, in order to control the number of items. Well, that's unfortunate. Ash, no. Ash is, yeah, there we go, ash. In order to do this, specify amount is 1, go back, specify amount of 8. So this way we always have the correct ratio of crafting items, and actually I think that it won't pull less than 8. I'm pretty sure if I've understood this mod correctly, that this should limit it. If there's not 8 ash combined in those 3 inventories, then it won't pull anything, including the 1 appetite. Okay, so that should be good for our input. And then our crafter, we need to put our fingers on the right keys. Appetite. And unfortunately we have to go through this mess again. Even though none of these match as closely as the actual ash does. But fortunately we only have to go through that mess once, it appears. So like I said, pretty well engineered mod. It makes everything pretty intuitive and easy to accomplish, really. I mean, fluid, ergonomic, I would say, I guess. Excess inventories, we want to go, if for some reason it does end up with extra, we'll just put it back in the barrel, and it doesn't allow us to, no, it does not allow us to prioritize individual things, so that's unfortunate. I guess we'll put it in the chest as well, because if the ash overflows, then we have a problem. I always do that. I just mean to close out of the little window, and I close out of the whole machine. And then our output is going to be the farm hatch target. It takes fertilizer from the north side, so we want to deactivate that. And we don't need to worry about this because there's only one thing and there's only one place for it to go, so it'll be self-limiting. So we should see, oh, if we connect this up, we had 59 in there. Now the trouble may be that it won't craft. Yep, straight up to 64. And then it would put the remainder in here, yes, from that craft. Okay. Because it was, yeah, alright. So that makes pretty good sense. And we have basically automated a tree farm. All we have to do now is make sure that there's rotten flesh and appetite available, and then we're going to have to watch the dirt versus sand ratio, but that's more of a forestry issue than a Steve's Factory Manager issue. And I will be considering ways in which we might make this process more efficient. I mean, honestly, you wouldn't need to. I probably will just because I'm geeky like that. But maybe I'll be back with an episode 2 of this same build before we move on to something else. I believe the next thing we're going to automate is going to be some applied energistics, which I won't be moving on to until after forestry is well along and I stop devoting quite so much time to filming that as opposed to just kind of maintaining it. So anyway, make sure you guys leave a like down there and maybe subscribe, especially if you're interested in this Steve's Factory Manager series, because it's going to be ongoing and basically in this format. So if you like what you see, subscribe so you know when the next episode comes out. And you guys have a wonderful day.